Hello, I'm David Towell. These days I do my work through an organisation called the Centre for Inclusive Futures. And every year the board of the centre convenes a reception at the King's Fund for people I've worked with during the previous year. The theme we used this year was the idea of looking at stories and people's experiences now that gave us clues or directions for creating a better future. And what this film reports is some of those stories that fitted in to a 10-minute video.
Hello, I'm Karen. I'm Keyring. I've got a little story, really. I guess the thing about that gives us hope for the future is about how people are really well included and part of their local communities. My little story is of people that we support in Wrexham who are a very lively bunch and very well connected, and they've got some really good supports and volunteers and some workers who really help them. But what we find has really works in their favour is that because they're very involved in their local community, things happen like the local furniture store, when they get things at end of range and they're really knocking down the prices, they phone up our worker first to see if any of our members would like it. And that's a really big difference. It means people have the opportunity to find things that are perhaps more lovely than they could get otherwise. It's not from the second-hand furniture bank, and they just really value it. And it's not a big thing, it's just people knowing people who think, oh, I'll just phone up Dana and see if she knows anybody before I put the for sale sign into the showroom. It's a little story, but it makes a massive difference.
My name is Nigel Collins. I've been in my house for 10 years, and I'm going to start moving out, moving into Bookham, a new home, and I'm starting moving a house in Bookham, close to my parents. There's my landlord. My landlord is Ben, my brother-in-law.
A job-related story. Just concerns a guy called George, sort of man in his middle years with Down syndrome, who came to do some voluntary work at a cafe that we run out in Woodford. Nothing particularly unusual about that. Did really well. Applied for a catering post and got the catering post, so I was working at the cafe, very, very proud. This was a few months ago. 2 weeks ago, he had his notice in, which on the face of it isn't such a big deal, but he'd had his notice in because the experience he got at the cafe, he'd applied for another job and got a job with a catering organisation who were going to be catering for the Olympics. And there was, I suppose, two elements. This one was my initial feelings of sort of, I'm not quite sure, frustration, annoyance. I mean, I've never known someone with a learning disability hand a notice in a job for another job. Now that may be just our experience, but I thought it was, so that was superb. But my initial thoughts were like, you can't do that. So that just, would question myself. But I thought it was a lovely natural thing for someone with a learning disability to have a job, to seek a better job, and to get that job and to pass it on. And that's very unusual in my experience. So just a nice little positive anecdote.
So recently, what's kind of happened in my life is at the great age of 61 and 3/4, I've fallen in love. Yeah, really, that's like a big deal. It's been a long time. The good news is that things can happen anytime, anywhere, and that anything's possible. So if that's possible for me, we can sure as hell try to figure out how to enable people to have good lives and do fun things, and to talk about love for people with disabilities. And when we start talking about what good lives mean and good support means, can we just get real? Can we just really say that's what we're here to do and to think about and to enable that to happen, whether that is about really having good relationships, or whether that's really about having somebody we care about, or whether it's about having sex, for God's sake. I mean, we don't do that very well with people with disability. We don't like to talk about it. And some of the reasons we don't like to talk about that is because we really don't think about people as human. And that's where I'm going with this. And so, you know, that's kind of, as I said, being where I am right now, and this is, what year is this? 2012? And, you know, we've been talking about this for a long time, and anything is possible. So if that's possible for me, it's possible for you, it's possible for anybody, and it's possible to talk about it.
Because we're on falling in love, I want to tell a very short story about a guy who, through the use of iPlanet, which is a system, and systems aren't always people-friendly, went from working with a staff team that wouldn't hear him about his sexuality, who kept insisting that he was confused when he had David Cassidy and World Wrestling gorgeous pictures of guys on his wall, to a point where having a relationship with a guy was on his iPlanet account as an outcome. Actually, not just having a relationship with a guy, he wanted a boyfriend just like Justin Bieber. And although we can't guarantee that as an outcome, I do know that he's had his first date, proper date with a guy. So that's the love story.
There was an 85-year-old woman who had managed to change the policy of the whole Oxford bus fleet so that wheelchair users got priority. There was a young guy who was doing the best guide to universities for disabled students, and there was a young man with a learning disability who talked about his pride at going into schools to educate children about what bullying was really all about and was not.
To end by thinking people with learning disabilities actually, and their families, can be entrepreneurs. We've been struggling with other parents to find a way for Simon to have a business. He can't have a regular job, he wants a business. And the Aldingbourne Trust that is supported and run by parents is a social enterprise. But I wanted to say sometimes we don't ask people with learning disabilities themselves, what do local people want? How can we actually make a difference? So we did actually ask Simon and his friends, what do you think would make some money? Because our funding's been cut and we want to be entrepreneurial. And one of them said, I think local people would like their duvets washing and drying in the open air. I don't know where he got that from, and the weather's not very good at the moment. But we've got a thriving business, hand washing duvets and drying them on bushes.